This is a CBS News special report. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. We come on the air with breaking news. After several dramatic and unexpected hours of high courtroom drama, today the plea deal agreement between Hunter Biden and the Department of Justice has just fallen apart. Hunter Biden, the son of President Joe Biden, came to court this morning expecting to plead guilty to 2 misdemeanor tax charges and was planning to enter into a pretrial diversion agreement on a felony gun possession charge. But in the end, there was no deal. It all collapsed. The judge presiding over the matter said this case needed more information before the judge would accept this proposed agreement. All of this follows a 5-year federal investigation led by U.S. Attorney for Delaware David Weiss. Now, before all this happened, Republicans had blasted this potential deal as merely a slap on the wrist and had accused the Department of Justice of interfering in this investigation. Meanwhile, 2 IRS whistleblowers also accused the Department of Justice of slow-walking parts of this investigation. U.S. Attorney Weiss, who we should note was nominated by then-President Donald Trump in 2017, has denied allegations of political interference. Now, Hunter Biden, when this was all set in motion earlier today, was expected to address reporters. After all this, we no longer know if that's going to happen. What we do know for sure is senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge, who was in the courtroom, joins us now from Wilmington, Delaware. Catherine, tell us what happened. Explain the change of arc of this story and Hunter Biden's demeanor throughout.
Well, Major, good to be with you. The 3-hour hearing in the courthouse behind me was extremely dramatic and tense. I was sitting for the most part of the hearing about 20 feet behind the president's son, and you could see, in my view, that he became increasingly anxious and somewhat agitated as it became clear that this plea agreement on the tax and the gun charge was in jeopardy. Just a few minutes ago, the federal judge Mary Ellen Noreika has told the court that she is deferring a decision on the plea agreement for the president's son. She said she cannot accept or reject it. She's asked the parties for additional information. She told them at one point, quote, "You are telling me just to rubber stamp this deal that is form over substance." She had serious concerns not only about the agreement on misdemeanor tax charges, but also on this diversion program for the felony gun offense. She said she believed there may be elements and provisions within that agreement that are unconstitutional in her view. She's given the parties 14 days to come back with filings to help clarify her questions, and she could reach a decision in about 30 days whether she will accept or reject this plea agreement. But this was an extraordinary scene that unfolded in the federal courthouse behind me, and just based on the demeanor of the president's son's legal team and Hunter Biden, one of a lot of disappointment, Major.
Catherine, help our audience work through this. It also strikes me that there was a fundamental misunderstanding in the presentation to the court of what this deal actually was. If I understand it correctly, Hunter Biden and his legal team thought that this deal, if sealed and approved by the federal judge, would end all things. It was global in reach, to use a term of art. But the prosecutor said no. The ongoing investigation continues, and that misunderstanding was sort of at the crux of one of the things the court was struggling to resolve. Is that about right?
Yeah, the simple explanation, Major, is that it does appear the two parties, Hunter Biden and his legal team and the U.S. Attorney in Delaware, for months have been talking past each other. From the perspective of the U.S. Attorney in Delaware, this remains an ongoing investigation, and based on what we heard in the court, Hunter Biden and his legal team felt that once this plea agreement was done, that his legal troubles were over. There was a sort of turning point in the hearing where the judge was asking about the ongoing investigation, and a member of the U.S. Attorney's team said, "I can't get into details." She asked, well, let's say, could there be a charge for a violation of foreign lobbying laws? The president's son did work with a Ukraine energy firm, a Chinese energy firm, a Romanian firm, among others, and he said that's possible. And that's when Hunter Biden's attorney says we clearly don't have an agreement here. This is not our understanding. So talking past each other on this simple idea that a plea agreement was going to be the end of the legal story for Hunter Biden, and the U.S. attorney maintaining that it may not necessarily be so, Major.
I want to bring in Scott Frederickson, a former federal prosecutor, is with us today. Scott, this strikes me as something that would definitely fall into the category of highly unusual for the two parties to be talking to each other, but as Catherine said, past each other on such a central element as to whether or not this was an agreement to end all matters pertaining to Hunter Biden in the future or not, and then it all falls apart. Walk our audience through how very different a circumstance this actually is.
This kind of circumstance should never have happened. That's why it's so shocking. The plea agreement has fallen apart because of one key piece, and that is the defense thought that the plea agreement was a global resolution of all charges, all ongoing investigation of by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware. The government made clear when asked by the court that that was not the case, that this plea agreement does not resolve ongoing investigation. The fact is, that was an issue when the plea agreement was first announced. The government, the DOJ, said the investigation is ongoing, and the defense counsel said, we understand this wraps it all up. How this could have gotten to this point with that fundamental misunderstanding is shocking. That just doesn't happen in federal court. There's a second alternative, and that is defense thought that they might be able to get this kind of plea through with an understanding on the record that it resolved everything and they could go on their way. That clearly was not going to happen today. It broke down under that fundamental piece of misunderstanding.
Joining us now is legal expert and analyst Ricky Clayman. Ricky, there's been a lot of conversation, debate is a fair word, about whether or not this plea deal as presented represented some kind of special treatment or something that was available to Hunter Biden because of his status as the president's son, meaning lighter treatment than somebody else. Your thoughts on that and where you see this case, after all this extraordinary developments today, heading?
Well, extraordinary is the word for today, but also for the misunderstanding that led to today. If this had, in fact, been a global plea deal, that is, by pleading guilty to 2 misdemeanor counts involving a failure to file tax returns for the years 2017 and 18, and a pretrial diversion on an application for a gun and denial of drug use, if somehow that had been a global deal, that Hunter Biden could not be prosecuted for anything else, particularly involving the questions of lobbying and not being a registered foreign lobbyist, then that would have been beyond special. That would have been beyond the pale. But I had never really understood this deal to be that global until we wound up in court today and saw that the prosecution didn't understand it to be that global either. So where is this going to go? Well, first of all, there is the matter of the simple resolution of the tax counts and the gun diversion. That's simple, that's clean, that can be done in and of itself. But are they going to continue to investigate? Well, if they weren't going to before today, clearly they are. And the they I am talking about is the prosecutor, the criminal justice system. We really thought that today was all about that and not about the politics, but it looks like the politics and the law collided.
And Ricky, very quickly, can Hunter Biden rescind that not guilty plea? Does that have a life of its own?
No, it doesn't have a life of its own. If you say you are not guilty, that happens at every arraignment throughout the land. But the problem that you've got now is what is to happen with today, and then what is to happen with the future.
No doubt. Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes is with us from the North Lawn. Nancy, this is an unexpected, and I would imagine for the White House, an uncomfortable turn of events. And I understand that it came up at today's briefing. What can you tell us?
It did come up just a few minutes ago, Major, and White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre's remarks were, as they usually are when it comes to Hunter Biden, pretty short and sweet. She basically said Hunter Biden is a private citizen, that this was a personal matter, that this was independently handled by the judiciary system, and by a U.S. attorney that she pointed out was appointed by President Trump. This is something the White House likes to point out a lot. She said the president and the first lady support their son, and beyond that, she referred all questions about Hunter Biden to the Department of Justice, as she has, as U.S. officials have so many times before. The president and everyone on down here at the White House, whenever asked about Hunter Biden, sings the same refrain, which is that the president and the first lady love their son, they're proud of their son, they're proud of the fact that he is picking his life up and trying to pull it back together after a devastating bout of addiction to alcohol and other substances. But beyond that, they are quite tight-lipped. They say they don't ever want to look like they're trying to influence the judicial process.
Nancy Cordes at the White House. Thank you. I want to go back to Catherine Herridge, who, of course, is in Wilmington, Delaware. Catherine, you've been covering this story for a very long time. Talk to our audience about not only what happened there before your very eyes in Wilmington, but other matters that are going to come before the House Republicans related to Hunter Biden and how they may or may not intersect.
Well, one of the things that struck me, Major, from the outset of this hearing is that the federal judge, Mary Ellen Noreika, really set the tone almost out of the gate. She said that this diversion agreement on the felony gun charge, in her view, contained unusual and not standard terms. And I think that set the tone, set the table for the entire 3-hour proceeding. That was her line of questioning throughout. If there was a moment where I think it really started to turn, and I felt I could see that turn among the defense team and the president's son, it was when there was a brief sort of off-the-record discussion between the defense attorneys and members of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware. It's a very small courtroom, and you could pick up part of the conversation. And what I picked up is that a member of the U.S. Attorney's team said that's just not in the agreement. It's not an agreement to keep criminal charges off the table well into the future or forever. And Hunter Biden's attorney, Chris Clark, said, well, I guess maybe we just rip up the agreement, in effect. And to me, that was the moment that really severed this deal and paved the way for this decision by the judge to say that she needs more information and that she's going to defer on whether to accept or reject it at this point. The second part of your question, House Republicans have said that their investigations continue regardless of what was going to happen in Delaware today. I think one can make the argument that it now adds a little bit more fuel to the fire of those investigations. They had been hoping to hear from the U.S. attorney in Delaware under oath testimony at the end of September about his decision-making process. I think it's fair to assume that that now may be pushed off, depending on the resolution or non-resolution of this case in the next 30 days. Those investigations on Capitol Hill are extremely broad. I would sum it up by saying that they're not just simply looking at the business deals of Hunter Biden, they're looking at the family's involvement in these business deals. And the head of the House Oversight Committee, a Republican, has said that their investigation, in his words, have always been about Joe Biden. The White House position has been that these are tired, old allegations that have already been under scrutiny, and they do not find them credible in this case, Major.
Catherine Herridge in Wilmington, Delaware. Thank you. Once again, there is no federal plea deal in the Hunter Biden case. Our coverage on this story will continue on CBS News Streaming, your local news, and tonight on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News Special Report. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Good day.